they are now launching what we had predicted in the late 1990s, and that is a series of diversionary false events to confuse the public and the politicians and the Pentagon as to what these UAPs are. So the whole launch of the drones that you're seeing in the United Kingdom, those started after I got back from the United Kingdom, providing briefings to the senior leadership of that country about this emerging disclosure that will be the biggest event in modern human history, frankly. The people coming forward are not secondhand or even minor firsthand. These are operators assigned to special forces who've now risen up to a senior position at these key black sites, and they will be unmasked. They will be named, they will have the evidence, they will have the proof, and that's all happening in the next 30 days or so. I am telling you this because it is imminent. It's why I've been on a tour all over the world meeting with senior officials in the U.S. government, the incoming administration, the current leaders in the House and the Senate. In fact, I just got back from Washington last night. So that is what is happening. The drones are a predictable launch of a diversionary and a confusing event. They're certainly not extraterrestrial or NHI. The pop culture now is non-human intelligence term, NHI craft. It's clear that they're able to have assets that are ground-based or in STIFs, subterranean facilities, or what some people call DUMBs, deep underground military bases, where they can launch these sort of objects and create all kinds of confusion and alarm and panic. This is now breaking all into the mainstream news, just as this group is pivoting to disclose the facts and the real information. So this is a PSYOP, psychological operation. We predicted it. We've been predicting it for 25 years. If you read my paper that I wrote in 1999, it's on our website, drstephengreer.com, and it states very pointedly that the actors who are keeping this secret will take the momentum of disclosure and try to turn it into an alien invasion scenario, a good versus bad alien scenario, a way to keep running all over the world and also aggrandize the military-industrial complex with trillions of dollars in new spending to create a countermeasure to the alien. So we know this was the plan that was hatched in 1953 or so at the CIA. We have documents to that effect, and that it would only take place because there had been a long-term, multi-decade psychological operation that began in the late 50s in earnest with the man-made UFOs, and then later where they were using altered humans, and then in the later robotic aliens to abduct humans and to instigate terrorizing events like mutilations. And on occasion where they placed these man-made UFOs over developing world villages and blown up the whole village and dozens of people. Now we have people on the inside who know all this. And so now the incoming president doesn't know this, the Congress doesn't know this, and 99.9% of the Pentagon don't know it, but this is what's going to be coming out in part. And the very granular details of what this defection group is going to put out there, we don't know, but it will absolutely be dispositive proof. But also the fact that they've agreed to unmask themselves, meaning they'll be named, is new. I just learned that a couple weeks ago when the leader of that group met with me at my place in Washington, D.C. So we'll see what happens if they don't get scrubbed. I mean, if they're not between now and then, this is what's coming out, and I'm making an attempt. I sort of joke I've become the cosmic Paul Revere, going around trying to give a heads up to leaders around the world about this.
You know, exactly. Busy times right now, and it's crazy what's going on in the major media on how they're putting it out there. We don't know what these things are, but don't worry about it. They don't mean us any harm. And some of
what nonsense. We know what they are, and we know why they're there. Now, the press conference at the Pentagon today, there was a young woman who was saying, well, blah, blah. And I think, honestly, now people say, well, she's lying. She's not lying. Look, I've been briefing people at the level of 3-star generals and CIA directors for 31 years this week when I first briefed the director of the CIA. who knew nothing about this issue. They were lying to him. So people make this big mistake and they think that because you're in the US government or the CIA or DOD, Department of Defense, that you know all about this and everyone's in this big conspiracy keeping it secret. No, 99.9% of everyone in the US government, particularly our political leaders, know virtually nothing about this subject. And what they do know is 9 parts disinformation, false information, and maybe 1 part information. And that's true of the House Oversight Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Armed Services Committee, because I know that when we have gone up there and provided, like the last meeting I had up there about a month ago, I had the senior official from Great Britain and the head of this special forces unit that is going to be assigned to law enforcement, not the defector, and then our whistleblower, the Marine, Michael Herrera, who saw one of these man-made UFOs with special forces, special operators in the process of kidnapping humans that were crated up to be taken into human experimentation. Now, the group that is defecting have been part of that, and they feel terrible about it, and they're going to expose those criminal activities. So this is going to be the biggest disclosure in modern history, bar none. And the name of this film, Battle for Disclosure, which I helped you with, that is the name that is an important one to remember. It's a battle. Now, why? Because after all this comes out, this is when the battle really begins. Because what does a new incoming president do about this? What is the Congress going to do about it? Do we put our military and the media go on this sort of rabbit hole of negative false information, which is 90% of, say, ufology, abductions, mutilations, good aliens, bad aliens, grays, all the stuff that's been put out there over 70 years of counterintelligence and psychological operations. If that is where that goes, we're in an interplanetary conflict. If we can expose that as a big lie, then we can move to what has been called this golden age. And by the way, it wasn't just Trump that said, we've been talking about a new golden age of enlightenment on Earth since I started being a meditation teacher in 1973 and 4, 50 years ago. And it's about this information coming out with the technologies being used for peaceful purposes to eliminate poverty and create almost like a heaven on earth. And fix the environment with free energy, but also to start a program where we make contact with these civilizations peacefully instead of shooting them down. So the disclosure coming out is the easy part, even though it's taken me 31 years to do it, 33 years. But then the battle of disclosure really begins, and it's this. How do we look at this? How do we interpret this? And if this disclosure momentum gets hijacked into this terrible, frightening left turn into destruction and conflict, it will be 1,000 times worse than COVID. And that's what I'm saying, the senior incoming people around the incoming president. I would say the same thing to Biden. This is a nonpartisan effort. I want to emphasize that. Now, if it goes this other way, it could be one of the most unifying, beautiful moments in human history. I think you have seen the sample speech I've written for various world leaders. Remember, I sent that to you last week. And as far as I'm concerned, you can publish that. But the point I'm making is, it really is the battle for disclosure and how this goes. And is it something that benefits the human species and our future on Earth, or is something that leads to panic and destruction? Now, the people who want panic and destruction, they obviously want it to go in the direction of mainstream ufology. But if it goes in that direction, it's a worst case scenario. And I've said that for 25 years. So this is where the battle really does get joined. And it's information, it's a psychological op. And, this nonsense with the drones is just sort of tickling the system. Here's the other part of this. And that is the media, as you mentioned, the corporate big media, is integrated horizontally and vertically into this organization doing that. So, and what we've been saying that we can prove that through documents and what have you that we have. But the other part of it is that I called for about 30 years. I've been calling this entire plan to do a false disclosure and a psychological spin on it as sort of a cosmic Gulf of Tonkin. That basically, to follow on with what you said, the outcry by the media that was all scripted and that then went to a public outcry forced Johnson to greatly expand the Vietnam against his better judgment. This is historical fact, and it led to that quagmire. But it enriched the military-industrial complex trillions of dollars. So, they don't really care if it millions of people. They care if it consolidates their power and their control. And remember, money at that level isn't about a paycheck. It's about power, about control.
No, absolutely.
The power, the control, whoever's in charge, obviously they want to seize it all. And what's been going on lately in the UFO hearings, in our documentary, we're talking to firsthand eyewitnesses that Dr. Stephen Greer brought forward. We got DC Long, Michael Herrera, and among others. So when that happens, why do you think that these UFO hearings aren't talking to these firsthand eyewitnesses? Why are they bringing in these people that are second and third hand?
First of all, they've been approached by people like Lou Elizondo and others who are professional disinformation operatives. Secondly, they don't want actually to know the truth. And I put a portfolio together for House Oversight that have had a couple of hearings that listed, and it was on a hard drive as well as printed out, that had 762 whistleblowers firsthand. And I gave them the top 23 that needed to be brought forward who were high level, who had direct information. Instead, they pull in people who have no direct information or secondhand witnesses, or who, in the case of someone like Mr. Grush, had followed some leads that I had provided to his bosses at Senate Armed Services and Senate Intelligence Committee, but he himself was never direct witness. The people who were direct firsthand witnesses, very curiously, they never have called. And on top of it, here's a larger problem. When I first was called in by the senior investigator for the chair and co-chair of Senate Intelligence Committee about 3 years ago, they wanted everything I had. And I said, I will give it to you. But they said, and I said, you're going to need a dedicated staff to investigate this, because this is a very complex issue, and more complex than you can imagine. So our first meeting was a few hours in a SCIF, which is a secure compartmented information facility that's assigned to the Senate Intelligence Committee. And after that, they were going to have a staff of about 30 people through a contractor assigned to us to really do a deep dive into this. But the funding never got put together for that. Similarly, in the last couple of years, the House Oversight Committee was asking for a select committee with funding and professional staff, and that was denied funding, so that never happened. So let me, in the interest, I'm not trying to defend the incompetence of Congress, but also they don't have time and they don't have staff. The man who was the senior lead for the Senate investigating this was told he could spend 10% of his time on this issue when he needed 30 people spending 100% of their time. So in other words, they're trying to do it on the cheap and the quick and the dirty, but when they've tried to put together the funding and the appropriations to do it properly, they've been cut off at the knees. And I've been watching this. And so I'm not trying to defend the fact that we put on a silver platter, here are these firsthand witnesses who need to be called, and they won't do it. And instead they pull in these know-nothing people. But the problem is they also don't have a real investigation. I mean, it's sort of amateur hour, I hate to say that, with people who are very overextended and they're very busy. So this is the real problem with any of these people in Washington. And certainly it's the problem with the existing administration. But it's also a huge problem with the incoming administration because they're busy with a million other things. And, now here's what I think will happen. The revelations and the disclosures that are coming from this group defecting is going to focus everyone in Washington and in London and in Russia and all over the world like a laser, because it's going to be inescapable material. And senior operators, meaning SOs, special operators who have been operating these facilities and tactically involved, including the downing and retrieval of the ET craft and things like that. So at that point, it's no longer speculative, and the proof is there, and there are multiple corroborating people from these black sites. So I think that this will start a new era of at least attempting to get to a professional investigation, which has never happened before, honestly. There have been, sort of half-hearted attempts over the decades, and most of those have been corrupted, like the Arrow office was corrupted with Dr. Kirkpatrick. Other prior efforts, like the Condon Committee in 1969, the Robertson Panel in 1953, they were all corrupted. We have CIA documents to this effect by infiltrators who looked like they were truly academic investigators and they were on the payroll of the CIA. I can prove this, by the way. It's in our Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive if anyone cares to look them up. But here's the big problem with this, is that I'm trying to get people warned this is coming. And by the way, I didn't select this date. I want to be very clear. I've been saying this to some senior incoming cabinet nominees that I've met with for President Trump, is that I didn't pick this date. This date was picked by the group that's defecting. And so, but that's the reality I have to deal with and that they're going to have to deal with.